Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, the 9th of March. Excuse me, I'm recovering from a chest infection, so I'm a little bit gruff at the moment. I'm required to make a short announcement, so bear with me. We've all heard it before, but all the worse for repeating. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity. I've never quite understood what that means. And there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the committee are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called upon to speak and switch their microphones off again once they have finished. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members so wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may prove helpful to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members might use the raise hand function. The use of the chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain, and I will declare the result after each vote. Breaks of 5 minutes will be held every hour and will be taken at the appropriate time after a speaker in the debate is finished. If we are voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated into the meeting as appropriate. Thank you very much for your patience on that. Excuse me. Membership changes. Do we have any membership changes?
Michael Muir, substituting for Jonathan Kay for this meeting only.
Thank you very much. Michael, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much for stepping up. Really appreciate it. As I say, excuse me, I've got a bit of an issue with my throat. Could I ask you, if appropriate, to declare any interests you may have with regard to this meeting and this agenda? I'm not seeing any hands. I take it then at this stage there are none. Don't hesitate if anything on the agenda appears to let us know. Can I take you now to the minutes of the committee meetings held on the 20th and 28th of January 2021? You will recall that was the integrated plan scrutiny meeting in 2 sessions. Can I have your agreement or otherwise, please, for those minutes?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. They're coming in agreed, none again. So, excuse me, I'll take that your agreement with my thanks. Okay, well, so on into the meeting business itself. It's our last meeting of this administration, and I have to say, from my standpoint, it has absolutely flown past. But as we'll see in a few minutes, as we have the opportunity to do a quick review, the amount of business that's actually been done is prodigious. And this is my opportunity really to thank you all. Some of you have been here for the whole administration and some have come in more recently, but I'm mindful of the fact you've all made contributions, very, very important contributions to the work that we've undertaken. And I do hope that you have felt it's been valuable and useful and contributed to the work that this authority does. And more importantly, from my point of view, has gone some way to give residents some confidence in the business that this authority undertakes. This last year, of course, has been quite extraordinary. I won't dwell on it. We've all got our COVID stories, but going through the pandemic, I don't think if we had been reflecting a year ago, I just don't think we could have had any idea how quickly the authority would have to change, the business would have to change, the staff would have to change. The massive changes that have been undertaken by our absolutely amazing staff, and of course, in a modest way, the changes that we ourselves have undertaken, and we have learned a huge amount. And I don't think our business will ever be quite as it was before COVID. And hopefully we can take the positive elements of that and work forward with it. In closing, you'll have heard me at full council. I'm full of admiration for our officers, and especially those officers that have gone way beyond to support the work that Scrutiny has done. We could wish for no better, in my view. This is, officers generally, and of course the stakeholders that have come in to work with us as well. But in particular, my thanks to Natalie and Fiona, who, quite literally keep this train on the rails and put in a prodigious amount of work behind the scenes to ensure that this works, and most importantly, is effective. And because of their hard work, we are considered in a positive light elsewhere in the business of local government. So my heartfelt thanks to you, and my heartfelt thanks to the ladies for looking after us so well. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask, excuse me, I'm going to ask Fiona to take us at a canter through a review of these last 4 years. Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. So as David said, as we're coming to the end of this municipal cycle, and this meeting's the last of the committee as it stands, this report is intended just to enable members to reflect on the scrutiny work that you've participated in, and that this committee particularly has led on over the last 4 years, because even if you haven't participated in certain topic groups, it's all about the way this committee has led on prioritising the work programme and how the scrutinies will be completed. So I've drawn out some examples of this last year that illustrate the way that we've responded to the change in circumstances and impact of the pandemic, as David mentioned, by finding new ways of working, like having the live stream virtual meetings, which obviously you have also in panels as well, the webinars that we've started to run, the scrutiny leads briefings, and the joint committee meetings we held to look at the work programme, and make sure it was all really focused on what was important now with the pandemic context. So one of the challenges this year has been to cover as much scrutiny work as possible, and that we know members wanted to cover, but with a limited officer resource. And I don't mean just Natalie and I, but obviously there is that element to support the scrutiny, but mainly the availability of officers and other colleagues, as David mentioned, other stakeholders who have just been under immense pressure delivering COVID response work this last year. And we've really worked within the good relationships that we've had, and I think due to the way that we've carefully, and you as members have carefully prioritised and looked at how you want to scrutinise things, so as not to overly demand when it isn't necessary, but really prioritise where you need to look into detail. I think that's worked very well in enabling you to cover a solid amount of the really important topics. This is where this this committee's careful prioritisation of the work programme and using the full range of methods of scrutiny that we have has been really important. So thanks to this, the key areas of scrutiny in terms of COVID impacts, such as the COVID step back scrutiny, safeguarding adults, care home delivery, and recently the hate crime scrutiny, they've been examined in depth via topic groups, and members have also been kept updated via the committee on important areas such as education and COVID impact, adult care services, human resources, and a number of other topics. And I think we've used, and you have made the decision to use the committee more to get updates and make sure you've got that overview, which helps you to know where you want to prioritise the work. And I think we've been using the committee more in that way this year, which I think seems to be working well. But really, this report just provides that opportunity for a bit of reflection on the work, hopefully some acknowledgement of the good work that you've been doing as well. And I'd certainly welcome any thoughts or comments from members about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Members, over to you. Any thoughts, comments, reflections, points to note for the future? Francis, good morning.
Good morning. I'm not sure this is the place to say it. You might want this a little bit later on, I don't know. But I thought the work programme has been excellent, and congratulations to all and thanks to all of the officers who've been supporting us. I think my concerns relate to when we have meetings, when we have investigations and we invite people to come along and give us advice. It's one of those catch-22s. People who are available will come and people who are busy won't. So whilst we can send out the invitations to the parties that we wish to attend, we end up only with those who are available. Perhaps I can give you an example. We did a really interesting one on the LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership, and it transpired at the end that the only people who came and gave us evidence were those who were in, I'm going to say loosely, government employment. So we had staff from the county council who were great. Interestingly, we had Scott Crutchington who came to represent Stevenage and tell us how things were going there. We had 2 excellent people from education. And the reason we had no one other than the LEP chairman, again, who was excellent, we had no one from business, enterprise, commerce. And the answer was they didn't have the time to come. Now, we absolutely understand that. But if we could have had people from small business areas, which was exactly where we felt the LEP could make huge strides forward and support SMEs, small and medium businesses, but none came because they weren't able to take time away from their work. Maybe we didn't invite them nicely enough, which is my way of saying push them hard enough. I don't know. We can only do what we can do, and we can't force people to come. Maybe remote links, half an hour from your desk, is an awful lot easier than taking a morning to travel across to County Hall and be present and then go back again. Maybe we can do more remote links. But I think I'm trying to ask officers if they can work even harder and, dare I say that, try and look at the balance of the invitees who have accepted and try and ensure that we've got the representation from the commercial, business, finance world, where the bottom line is slightly more difficult and they don't have the flexibility that we see in local government. Sorry, I've gone on a bit, but I think there's an opportunity to improve if only we can do that.
Very cogent as always, Francis. Thank you so much. Yes, I mean, this is always going to be a problem with commerce and business and banking.
Absolutely.
They live in a different world to us, and possibly that's exactly where they should be. But I entirely take the point. But I will ask Natalie very quickly, because she's much more experienced at this, and of course Fiona and Natalie are at the front end of trying to persuade people to join us. And if there is a challenge there, I think you've raised a very interesting point, and as that becomes relevant in future meetings, maybe we can gain some knowledge and improve our performance on that. Natalie, Fiona, any thoughts?
I think Francis's final points about the ability of holding meetings virtually does make it more feasible to have people not just from within the Hertfordshire patch, but we know that nationally, for instance, with the flooding scrutiny, which the committee has got the scope to look at today, where we are going to be seeking to hold that virtually, because we know there are potentially people who could contribute to that. As Francis says, for 30 minutes, they're not going to travel from wherever it is they're based to try and park at County Hall, try and find the room, and then do 30 minutes and then go. So I think there are a number of advantages to us not always holding topic groups as virtual meetings, but I think where there is the need to hear from a broader spectrum of contributors, I think that works really well. I think within for instance, in the step back review, even though the voluntary sector witnesses were all local. They were all over the county, but because it was held as a virtual meeting, they were able to attend and were there for the duration because they could keep it on in the background whilst they were getting on with other things. And I think it's recognising the workload that other people have, particularly if we're looking at small businesses and voluntary sector. They're small organisations with people wearing multiple hats. So that kind of approach works really well. Fiona's worked incredibly hard with the webinars in terms of negotiating dates, going backwards and forwards to witnesses to get a date which accommodates the maximum number of people so that members get the broader perspective as well. And sometimes that's why when we're looking to plan a webinar or a topic group, we are making a plea to give us a bit more time just to do that additional negotiation to get the additional people involved who will help you to understand what the issues are and make really good, solid recommendations. So I take Francis's point completely. We have worked really hard, and I hope we are making improvements on that. But it's not job done. It is something that we will continue to endeavour about how we hear from people to enable members to get that rounded view.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Fiona, anything to add? Any comments there?
No, nothing to add. I agree. I think it's a really good point that Francis makes, and I agree, as Natalie said. Now, with the opportunity for virtual meetings, it really helps. It's definitely easier to get those national speakers coming in, and people, from other organisations. So fingers crossed. We'll keep working at it. I absolutely take the point. Thank you, Francis.
Yeah, I think the expression of the moment is the hybrid meeting, and we've not had one ourselves at this committee, but I can see that that's going to be quite a usual means of working going forward, and it does means we can pull in expertise or comment from literally anywhere on the planet, which I think is going to be quite exciting. I've got Nigel, then Sandy.
Thanks, David. And I'm going to start by giving you a big vote of thanks, because I think your chairmanship has been first class and a lesson to us all. So thank you very much for that. And repeat your comments about the officers, who I think have worked incredibly hard this year. What's been very, very challenging circumstances, and I only joined this committee in May, so thrown in the deep end, as it were. I think the joint scrutiny that we held in June, July were very valuable indeed in allowing us all to reflect on what was required and how we should respond. And I think the programme we've had has been very good. I'd echo a lot of what Francis said. I think he raises some really, really good points there. I think looking forwards, you just mentioned what I was going to mention, which is hybrid meetings. And I think that's going to be a real challenge. It's actually quite easy to do a Teams meeting because everybody's in the same boat, as it were. But when you're trying to technologically organise meetings with lots of people in different environments, my experience from business is that has always been a problem in the past, even with budgets available. So it's by no means straightforward, and I'd almost prefer that we stuck to Teams. I think it's been a really effective way of going about our business, and particularly from the point of view of witnesses, whether they're challenged from a time perspective or a means perspective, if they live the other side of the county, and and I think on the witness side, I think we have made strides. I think hats off. The topic group, I'm sure Sandy might want to comment on this himself, but the topic group recently on hate crime, that was so much more powerful, as we remarked last week, because of the witnesses that we had there, who were those affected by the issue, not just those responsible for dealing with it. And you'll know I was slightly frustrated that we didn't get more frontline experience when we discussed education, for example. And I do think that's somewhere we need to, sorry Fiona and Natalie, push even harder if we can, to find ways to get evidence from those who are affected by the issues that we are scrutinising, as well as the people who are trying to do their best to sort them. I think that's it from me.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Thanks, Nigel, and thanks for your compliment. Really appreciated. There's a lot of work from everybody's part. Everybody puts a lot of work into this, and that's very gratifying. Yeah, when it comes to hybrid, yes, you're right. It is something that's going to be a challenge. But when you think that the television news does it multiple times a day, and very slickly, but of course they've got a budget and they've got a huge amount of staff, so we've got to do it within funding, and Fiona and Natalie are going to have to become experts with a stopwatch. But yeah, it's a challenge. I think you're right. There's room for meetings in face to face and all teams, and then we'll have a damn good crack at the hybrid and see what comes up. We won't be alone. There'll be others struggling with us. Sandy.
Thank you. Nigel has slightly stolen my thunder because he anticipated what I was going to say. I mean, like him, I'm a newbie on this committee. I've been on it for a year. I had a previous existence some years ago under a different chairmanship. I think that the hate crime topic group was immensely benefited by the victim's voice. And my instinct is that for those people who were talking about challenging experiences, I think the slight distancing of being at the other end of the technology and being in a familiar environment, their home, rather than coming to a daunting place called County Hall and finding out where to park and all of that, and coming into a great massive atrium hall. You know, I actually think that made it probably easier for them to take part. I think hybrid meetings, I mean, like Nigel, you know, I battled with these things when I was in business, and we had those things called spiders that sat in the middle of conference tables. And
yes,
there would be a voice from Singapore, you know, coming at some, you know, oh Christ, double O in Singapore, but speaking. But it was possible, and you learned how to do it. It will probably need some training, but I think that, you know, there are people, first of all, as we've said, national people or people who are very busy who can't take the time, but other people who actually will feel more comfortable. And I think one of the things I hope that we do, because I think it really worked in the hate crime topic group, is to consistently feel in all of the topic groups that we do is the customer voice. I mean, victim seems to be the wrong word, although there are victims of flooding, for example, you know, and is their voice actually being heard? Just so we as county councillors remember in the end what it is all about. And it's not for us to pat ourselves on the back and say the systems work. It's for us to actually understand what it feels like out there at the receiving end. And I think that, you know, the distance talking might hugely assist that. So I really think that's an initiative and a way of learning that we really have to seize and go forward and build on.
Yes, thank you, Sandy, and a compliment to you, if I may. Your chairing of that was exceptionally good. You had it absolutely to a T. You were firm when you needed to be firm. You were receptive when that was what was needed. And I entirely agree. To have witnesses like that, perhaps if I would use the expression lay witnesses, i.e. those that are not used to putting themselves in that position, I think to have the comfort of their own or the surroundings of their choice, and as you say, not have the stress of coming into County Hall in the strange environment and what have you. Although I have to say, Patsy would not be stressed by anything. She is the most extraordinary person. I've known her for many years, and she is an absolute jewel. She's a gem. But yeah, you're right. To put people in a situation where they're in a strange environment, little stress is probably not the best for the non-professional. But no, thank you very much for the work you did on that. That definitely was a notable. All our topic groups are good, but that was a particularly notable one in my view. No small part down to you. Lynn, I can't see you on the screen, Lynn. but I know you're there.
I'm here. I'm here.
Yes, you are. You are. Hello. A very good morning to you.
And to you. I just wanted to agree totally with what Nigel and Sandy said. And to also thank you. Like Nigel, I came into this late, but I think the strength of this meeting has been the fact nobody plays party politics. This is purely to get to the bottom of what is going on. And I'd like to thank everybody for doing that. It's made it a proper scrutiny rather than one-upmanship, which so many other committees can be, and I think we're all honest about that. Totally agree with what Francis said, and I will now become very unpopular when I say that perhaps sometimes to get small businesses on board, we may actually have to work outside the 9 till 5 time, and it may need to be an evening meeting, which is something that at county we tend not to do. But I think if you're doing a proper scrutiny, why should we, and apologies for that, it's either grandchild or the gas board, so apologies. Why should we be the ones that expects everybody to fit into our timetable rather than us do our best to accommodate them? The only other thing I'd like to say on this report is it's a shame the current IT system doesn't allow us to record webinars, and I hope we can get that moving forward, because some of the webinars we've had, if I'm honest, you don't always take everything on board at the time, and I think to go back and revisit would be wonderful, because quite often I thought, did I hear that right or have I heard that wrong? But as I say, thanks David, and thanks Nigel as the other vice chair. It's, you know, I think it's actually worked as a team, so, and to everyone else involved, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, you've brought up two extremely valuable points there, in my view. The non-partisan nature of the work, or the approach we should take to this, which I entirely salute and endorse, as you know, and the other about getting out of our comfort zone. Now, most of us would be, I think, fairly comfortable with meetings in the evenings occasionally. I'm sure it's not strange to any of us. In local government, it's another issue for the system, the bureaucracy, and of course we can't impose that on our own support officers without their willing participation. But were the perceived gain appropriate, I'm sure they would be happy to give that very considerable consideration. And it may well be that we have a session in the daytime and then break for an hour or two and then come back in the evening to hear witnesses for whom that is a more convenient option. And I can see Natalie's hand is up. She may wish to comment on that, but certainly, Natalie, over to you.
Certainly something I wouldn't want us to overlook, and I would really like us to consider how we reinstate them as either in person or virtual, are site visits, because that's often where members have gone to hear from users or victims who we're working around their availability, but also their lack of confidence or nervousness about coming into what is a very austere, official, authoritarian setting. And I know we've done that for modern slavery and victims of domestic abuse. So let's not lose sight of those, because I think that those work incredibly well in terms of being an informal meeting, of hearing people expressing very candid views. Health Scrutiny, we did manage to hold a virtual site visit, which wasn't the same. I won't make any pretense that it replaced it, but it was one way at the moment to accommodate that site visit where it's appropriate. And just to reassure members that we have done stuff in evenings. My most abiding memory is back in the day with Bernard Lloyd trundling around various bits of East Herts in a paddy wagon as we were looking at what taxi marshalling was really about on a Friday evening. Not an experience I would wish to repeat, because I was incredibly travel sick at the end of it. But yeah, we can do that, because I think members are absolutely right. You want to experience services when they're actually working, and if it's a after 5 o'clock service, that's when you want to go along. So yeah, more than happy to accommodate all of that, and then build it into how we, you know, enrich the work programme and the scrutiny experience.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Looking around, I can't see any other hands, but I can only get 4 of you on the screen at the moment. So if there's anybody else that's got a comment or wishes to contribute at this stage, would you make yourself known, either by putting a hand up or in extremis singing out? Otherwise, I should take you to the recommendation on this. Forgive me, as I say, I'm wrestling at the moment with Modern Gov. One of the last items, certainly on the last page, the recommendation on agenda page 19. And the recommendation is that the committee considers the report on the activities undertaken and endorses the approaches for the future. No, sorry, that's the next item. That's the wrong one. This is the problem with Modern Gov when it's not talking to you.
David, I think you're correct.
Oh, I'm correct, am I? Okay, fine. There we go. That makes a change. Are we all content?
Chairman?
Yes, Francis. Is that you, Francis? I can't hear you now.
Well, hopefully you can see me and hear me.
But yes, exactly. Yes, well done. Yeah, well, here we are.
We've come up with quite a lot of comments, and I'm not sure that the recommendation, I didn't know how many comments would come forward, but right. The recommendation, we're endorsing the approach for the future. We just need an extra 2 words in there, noting the various comments, because I think we would like to think our comments had been noted rather than just rolled over, as it were.
Absolutely, it's a given.
I'm sure the officers can find an appropriate word which just includes taking on board our comments.
I think, Francis, that what I would like to do is to actually strengthen that and to say that officers to take the various comments made during the debate to inform future practices. So that I'd be very happy. I mean, I'm going to take them away anyway, Francis, but we can get that noted in the minutes.
If you're all happy with that, I'm fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to the next item, I did admit to advise the committee, forgive me, that we've received apologies from John Sloan. That having duly been noted, go over to Fiona to talk us through the work programme. Fiona, floor is yours. That's all agreed, by the way. All agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so you've got your usual regular work programme report. And I suppose today, at this meeting today, the thing to keep in mind is that the decisions you make today on the work programme are going to be a really helpful legacy to the incoming OSC committee in May, which obviously may have many of the same members. And just hopefully that with the work programme that you're handing over to the new incoming committee, it will allow scrutiny work to sort of continue without delay, because what we don't want is kind of everything to stop and start again when you've got still some well-planned work for the next few months on that work programme. And so I think it will be very useful, the decisions you make today. The key points to highlight here, and the things that a decision from the committee will be required on, are the topics that have been suggested to add to the work programme, which are all arising from the IP. So we've got flooding, and assess the impact and financial cost of bringing the HWRC, Household Waste Recycling Centres, operations in-house, equity and consistency of catch-up provision for all pupils across all types of schools following lockdown, effectiveness of increased care worker pay from 1920 to 21-22 on recruitment and retention, and that one, it was mentioned from the IP to be scheduled in 2022. But the other, so the flooding one, we have a scope attached to this report, which you've been able to have a chance to have a look at. So the household waste recycling centres and equity and consistency of catch-up, we don't have any further, we haven't anything further on those yet. So if you have comments about timing or scrutiny methods that you want to make in this discussion today, that would be useful. The care worker pay, again, there's no kind of further work being done in terms of thinking about the scrutiny method yet, but there is the mention of scheduling in 2022. So that's kind of all the information, and any comments in this discussion will be taken on board, in the further planning after today's meeting. So the flooding one, officers have taken the opportunity to already start working on the scope for that, because it was felt that this is a topic which would be really beneficial for councillors to consider as soon as we can after May. And we know what an important topic it is for councillors and residents. And so that's why officers have already drafted this scoping document for your consideration. As always, with scoping documents, the main thing is the key lines of inquiry, and the things like the witnesses and dates, they're not set in stone. So especially with witnesses, that can continue to develop as more work is done kind of planning the programme, but all your comments about it, we'll take those into account today. So if you agree to on a scoping document today, perhaps with some comments added in, then officers can progress on the work and arrangements and witnesses, and then we can kind of look to be getting that on in the summer, before the summer sort of break. So that will be that's sort of the aim with that one, and that's all I wanted to highlight. And yeah, that's all from me. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I'm looking around. Sandy is first out the trap on this one. Good morning again, Sandy. Hello. You're first. You start us off. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I really did want to comment on the scope of the flooding scrutiny, because I was the person that moved the motion, which, if you like, was part of the source of this happening, and I'm delighted it is happening.
No pun intended, source.
Yes, exactly. yes, well, the spring perhaps. Anyway, before I start, deluging people with terrible metaphors, in the second paragraph, there's the word resilience, and I was very keen that that was there. And I just feel that when it comes to the key lines of inquiry, and we talk about mitigating impacts, but I think we should add the words build in resilience and build in resilience, because sometimes we're not going to be able to mitigate, and we're going to have to make sure that we are ready to deal with the floods that are going to happen. And I think in terms of financial implications, the bottom of that page, consider if current resourcing levels across HCC for flood management, mitigation, adaptation and response are sufficient. I think the word adaptation needs to be there. And then going over to the second page and the constraints, I think maybe flooding property internally may be overly restrictive. I think there are examples of flooding which actually are tremendously problematic. I think about one of my estates in my division where the bus service can't get through. And yes, as it happens, the way that the topography works, people aren't flooded out of their homes, but nevertheless, there's only one bus service that services the estate, and when it's bad, it just can't go there. And equally, residents driving their cars have a very long way round. And then finally, in evidence and witnesses, I go back to my earlier comments. I think it would be good to have people who've been at the sharp end of being flooded, just, one or two to give a flavour of what it's like and what their experience has been. And I think that would be very useful. So those are my quick comments on that. I mean, I'm delighted the topic group is happening, but I think all of those suggestions would make it more robust and more incisive.
Yes, thank you ever so much for that, Sandy. You can take a bow for this one. I think you're absolutely right about getting people, getting to hear from people who have suffered from flooding. There are certainly plenty to choose from. I'm reminded of the flooding in Puckeridge, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, where that was the time when we had pictures of Prince Charles on the trailer being towed by a tractor through the Somerset levels. And it was a simple fact that there were more homes flooded in the one little village of Puckeridge than there were in the whole of Somerset. But nobody saw any TV cameras, but a lot of families were severely affected. And I think some have left the community permanently now because it just wasn't practical to spend the sort of time necessary to come back into their properties. So that I think is a very, very valid point. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Ian.
Thank you, David. In paragraph 10 of the report, it mentions that there was a meeting of the Impact of Scrutiny Advisory Committee on the 3rd of March. I wondered whether members would be interested in a very brief summary of the results of that, which is that of the recommendations for the Safeguarding Adult Ward topic group, all 3 recommendations were accepted as complete. For the Children in Care Council mental health scrutiny, there's been some problems in moving forward on those recommendations because of the lockdown. It's been difficult to recruit a manager to carry them forward. So it was agreed that all 4 recommendations from that topic group should be carried forward and will report in June and September of this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's very helpful. I'm going to go to Francis next.
Thanks very much, Ian. That was really helpful. Several comments. Firstly, this scrutiny naturally follows what we did 2 years ago here. Do you remember we had these long discussions and we ended up with a very useful couple of hours seminar talking about who did what and the roles. And at that stage, we were talking about doing a proper in-depth scrutiny. So I'm delighted it's come forward. I do want to make a quick comment. I think it was Sandy. Internal flooding is far, far, far worse than when the road outside is flooded. I know when the bus can't get through. I know when the cars are stuck in the driveway. I know when people have to come in and fish the cars out. That's huge. But actually, it gets sorted. When you've been flooded internally, it's, you know, you're moving for 6 months, you've got damp. It's a horrendous situation. So I recognise the enormous pressures when it's external flooding, but I wouldn't want there to be a reduction in priority for internal flooding, if someone can balance that one. I've got 2 comments on this in particular. The problem with flooding, which we all know, is that all of the different entities involved, they do it's not me, Gov, it's your water. And of course, water is a bit of a nuisance, really. It sort of scuttles around all over the place. So identifying whose water it is really tricky. So I would hope that somehow there will be better clarification. It'll never be totally clear, better clarification where the responsibilities lie as a consequence of this flooding. And that takes me on to, and I will be quite blunt, the challenges that the County Council, in my experience, has faced with Thames Water. I think we all understand different pressures, different priorities, different funding models. But the number of times I'm told we've established, absolutely, we as the lead flood, whatever it's called, risk or management, have identified where the problem is, and now it has to be down to Thames Water because it's their pipes, their foul sewage issues. We absolutely need to ensure that Thames Water come along and we get a senior person from Thames Water coming along. I've seen the long list of people who are to be invited. Somebody senior from Thames Water who has responsibility and can give a sensible comment, so really important. My last comment.
Yes, thank you for that, Francis.
Sorry, I haven't finished.
No, you haven't. No, but I'm saying you're absolutely right. That is vital. We've got a loose expression, utilities, and I've already challenged officers around that and made it very, very clear that TW are a big part of the problem if they're not a huge part of the solution. Sorry to talk over you, Karen.
No, you were quite right. Thank you for that. My other issue is pollution. We've had an issue in South West Herts about pollution of the Colne and identifying, firstly, how to get the pollution cleared up. Secondly, identifying the longer term impact. And thirdly, who is responsible for putting out the warning signs to say this is polluted. Don't fish, don't do that, be careful, this is polluted. And there you're into environmental issues with districts and boroughs. You're talking about the polluter who, I mean, the law always said the polluter pays, but that's a bit of a tricky one too. So I would like, I haven't been as clever as Sandy and proposed a variation in the wording, but I really think where we're talking about the environmental impact, if the word pollution can be popped in there so that clarification about pollution and the responsibilities there, that would be really helpful.
Francis, it gives me no pleasure to disagree with you, but I think what you have done is raised another topic group indirectly. I think pollution is a topic entirely on its own. I'm not sure whether we're in a position to go there at this time, but I wouldn't want to take our focus off what we have in this scoping document. But I entirely agree, and I've been a victim of it myself in my own division, that pollution as a result of flooding, which in this case was a vehicle that ended up going down the river, and I could not get the Environment Agency to understand that a vehicle in a river equals spillage of diesel, spillage of battery acid, spillage of lubricants, plus contamination of whatever the contents of the van were. And it took me 3 days to persuade them that actually there was an issue there. So I entirely agree, but I think you've raised a very, very fresh and completely on its own standalone topic, to be frank.
Understood, but I would be sorry if the responsibilities of the districts and boroughs, just in terms of signing and signalling and recognising the pollution issues, were ignored.
They're not ignored. I think you've raised a very valid point. But to go there would reduce the time that we have to focus on this scoping document. So I'm broadly content with the scoping document as it is. But as I said, I've been talking to officers around some of the edges, and in particular the utilities and Thames Water specifically. I'm just going to call in Simon. I know Simon's been waiting patiently to see if he could support us. I think this is potentially an area where he could. Simon, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't expecting to be here, so apologies for no tie. Yeah, just on Francis's point, I agree we could go to town on pollution, but what we could add in is the Water Framework Directive, which is part of the responsibility to an extent of the League Local Flood Authority as well. And that covers, in part, water quality, which is what pollution's about. So we could do that without, I think, distracting. Just to pick on a couple of other points, Thames Water, absolutely, we can do our best to get a senior manager in, and we'll do that. The issue about witnesses, and I picked up earlier on a site visit, obviously, depending how keen you were, we could combine a witness visit with a site visit. So we could go to a site where there'd been flooding, we could talk to people who'd been impacted, if we could set that up, and you could see actually the trauma, and it is trauma, the trauma it does for people when they're internally flooded. No problem with the adaptation in the finance as well. And on resilience, I just split that into two. I talk about planning. So this is about planning new build and making sure we're resilient there, but also homeowners, so residents being ready for and resilient as well. And again, that's something we can pick up with people who've been flooded. I think that was it for the time being. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Cogent and helpful. I'm going to go to Ken, followed by Nigel, and then Michael. Ken, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, David. As usual, Francis is on the button with a couple of points, and we do need to look at Thames Water. We need to bring somebody in who's going to actually give us answers, because quite frankly, even with Oliver Heald's input, they just don't respond, with sewage running through people's gardens. So we do need them to man up and give us some answers. We might want to bring Ringway in. I mean, I've heard from pretty senior people that our contract wording, particularly with gully cleansing, is shall we say, you could drive a coach and horses through it, because apparently, I haven't checked it, the wording is that each gully needs to be checked, it needs to be visited. But if they can't get at it and there's a car on it or it needs digging out, they just put a tick on it and go away. And they don't have any form of system whereby they've got to revisit. So it gets put away. You know, we've done it, we've made a visit, our 18-month check or whatever. So I think we need to look at the contract wording for Ringway, but it might be a good idea to bring Ringway to the meeting to actually advise us, because they're the people with frontline experience of what they're seeing and what they've how they can make things better. But Sandy's comments about flooding in the houses should be extended. I think that's right, because yeah, there aren't that many houses that are flooded, but there are a huge number of people that are nearly flooded, and it's a very visible thing when villages are cut off for a time and cars are stuck in lose their engines in flood water where they drive through them too fast or they're on a stupid fault. But it's the visible face where people don't believe that we're actually doing anything. And sometimes we need to show people that we're actually doing things, but have repeat flooding every month for several weeks at a time until the water's died down. You know, it's got to be attended to. So, yeah, my points, Ringway attending and having a look at the contract wording for the Ringway dig-outs and visits.
Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate that. Who did I say I was going to next? I believe it was Nigel.
I think it was. Yes.
I think it was indeed.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ken. My post bag is probably fuller of flooding items than almost anything else over the last few months. And I totally agree that we need someone from Ringway there. And I totally concur that the contract with Ringway is something that needs to be looked at. And in fact, I've got an email thread with Steve Johnson on this right at the minute. But the other things I think have been raised, which I'd also support. Francis made the comment, just looking at my notes, that it takes a lot of effort to decide whose water it is, and therefore who's responsible. Well, I think that's very true, but actually maybe what we need to be engendering is more of a feeling about the joint ownership of the problem between the different authorities, and I hope that's going to come up in the first line of inquiry, and that's not just between county and the water company, it's also between districts and boroughs and the county in coordination of preventive measures and thinking of leaf cleanings and so forth. And again, with Ringway, in terms of the very often observed correlation between recent roadworks and flooding issues. And I think we've all had examples of that in our divisions where roads have been built up and the gullies narrowed without the proper procedures being followed. So those are the things I do agree with. I thought Francis' introduction of pollution, I can't tend to agree with you, David, that that's probably a totally different topic group, but it's a very important issue. And I mean, the one I've been wondering about is something we probably ought to be looking at from a scrutiny point of view for a while now, is the whole issue around the pollution from the bromate in Sandridge. Not in Sandridge, in Sandridge, sorry, which is affecting a huge area, and is as the sort of investigation of that, which I got quite heavily involved with a year or two back, has shown up quite a lot of real issues between how we work across different authorities, and particularly the Environment Agency, and what we can and can't do to make the polluter pay. And it's probably a bigger issue than just at county, but it is a very sore point in my local area, in terms of the way that's not been addressed over the last 20 years now since it was first identified. The other thing on the work programme, I was trying to find the conclusions from our joint scrutiny back in July, and I can't find them, I'm afraid. I'm sure they're there somewhere. But my notes from that meeting included the need to go back and have another look at CAMS, which I think we had originally thought we would do last year, but obviously it got pushed out because of COVID and the other priorities. And that doesn't appear to be anywhere in the system anymore.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment or two. On the question of gullies, which is clearly an issue that all of us have a great deal of sympathy for, we have got the Highway Agency, that is us, Highway Authority, coming along, not the agency, the authority. Now, they're not going to talk about traffic lights. I very much doubt they're going to talk about roadside trees or installation of zebra crossings. They are going to be talking to us, I suspect, very much about gullies. So I think we can take that as a given, whether it's Ringway or whomsoever, above my pay grade to decide. But certainly your comments have been noted, and it might well be useful to have, as we're there as the policy makers, and we've got the officers who do the service delivery, and then ultimately the operatives that do the work. It may well be that we establish a link there, and thank you for that.
I might do it. Just a suggestion in terms of witnesses. I mean, there is one particular example that is actually just up the road from me. It's not in my division; it's in Margaret's. But I think it did involve ingress into the property, but it also highlighted a lot of the other sort of more general flooding issues. So I can send the details to Fiona and Natalie as to who that is. I'm sure that I know the people involved, and I think they'd be quite happy to share their experiences. And it did involve blocking of roads, preventing people accessing, people who are on 24-hour call, not being able to get out, those sorts of issues that I think maybe would cover the broader picture, not just flooding of internal flooding, but also the inconvenience and other headaches that we've had as a result of these increased instances of road flooding, surface flooding.
Yeah, I think we all could. I mean, the one I mentioned earlier, Puckeridge, is not in my division, but one I'm very, very familiar with. And, that did involve action or lack of action by the Highway Authority. It did involve action or lack of action by the EA. And it did involve inappropriate actions by some residents, which all worked towards producing a situation where 9 properties were flooded, and we're in, and Francis said 6 months. One of those properties has only just come back into use after 4 or 5 years, and of course there is the fear that and the common yardstick, which is that if the water is more than possibly a half a metre, 19 inches in old money, very often, if it's there for any length of time, and that's usually a day or two, the property has suffered so much damage that it can't be brought back, and that is really quite frightening, especially when you see the water level rising. And we have this other problem in Hertfordshire, where people live on the top of a girt hill and think that they're safe, and yet we have a lot of flooding in my division on the Hertfordshire Plateau, which is considerably, it's hundreds of meters above sea level, and people just can't.
David.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm thinking but
I think you're thinking feet.
Well, certainly hundreds of feet above the local river.
Yes.
But I'm sure. And on your comments about CAMS, I'm sure that's been noted. I've got Michael next, then Lynn, and then assuming nobody else wishes to speak or comment, I'm going to just ask Simon to come in quickly to tell us what he's picked up from this. So, Michael, over to you.
Thank you. I agree with everybody on their comments on flooding. It was mentioned that Thames Water should be included, but in North Herts it's Angler Water, so that one of their directors or higher management should be invited as well. We do suffer flooding in Baldock and Letchworth. And part of the problem is that I've had my road engineer out, and in old areas all over Hertfordshire, the drainage under the road, the pipes are so big, but now any new pipes that are put into the ground are much larger to take the water away. And Anglia Water is very resident that to dig up the road and relay wider pipes is beyond their scope, money-wise. So those questions need to be answered as well. Thank you.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Michael. But in practical terms, all the rivers in Hertfordshire flow to the south, with one exception, which is the one that you're alluding to, which flows to the northeast. So the actual Anglian water drainage influence in the county is actually very small, and it is parts of northwest Letchworth and Baldock. So please don't feel put out if we don't actually get Anglian, because over 95% of the issues will be with Thames Water, and I'm sure anything that Thames Water tells us will inform our work going forward with Anglian. But thank you for that. I'm going to go to Lynn. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Mine is actually on a different subject to flooding, so I don't know if you want to go to Simon first to wrap up the flooding, or it's very quick, but it's not about flooding.
No, let's take yours, because it may be that Simon can comment on it.
Okay. When I looked at the list, going back to what we were looking at, it's about bringing the HWRC in-house. I was just going to say, because we were looking at what date's most appropriate, it's just a comment, I don't know the answer, but bearing in mind that in Nigel's division, which is on the border of mine, we have a new site being built. I would have thought that any scrutiny on that, it would have made sense to have done it before it was built, so that if it is something about bringing it in the house, it could be brought in house on the handover, rather than hand it over to somebody and then think, well, we didn't really want to do that. So it's just thinking about what is happening around new ones being built. Thank you.
Okay, no, officers can take that up with you offline. I think that certainly bears consideration. That's fine. Excuse me, Michael, can you take your hand down, please? I'm assuming it's a legacy hand. And I'll go to Simon just to see if there's anything he's got for us to close this off.
Just a couple of things, Chairman, although you've said in part what I was going to say. Number one, Anglian Water, you're right, it is such a minimal impact on the county. I'm not sure it would add a huge amount of value. Second one is you talk about highways. As you saw from the scope, highways will have a big part to play in this. Yeah. My advice, although it is only advice, is I'd focus on the client side of the highways. They're the people who write the contracts, rather than Ringway. Ringway just do what it says in the contract. But that's another matter. And then just on priority, again, my advice is, I know there is road flooding, and our lead local flood authority strategy talks about road flooding. It is on the list to be investigated. There are some trigger points. I think if a road is closed more than 5 days, if it prevents access to hospital or another important facility. But internal flooding really is the issue here, and there is a lot of internal flooding in Hertfordshire. I think we've just written to over 3,000 residents. That's where the real impact is. But I'll follow what the committee want. And just finally, nothing to do with flooding, but recycling centres is my purview as well. And just a heads up that we have been asked to bring a full report back to the Community Saved Waste Management Cabinet Panel in October, which is 12 months on from when all the sites came in-house. So I, again, would perhaps suggest that if you wanted to look at a scrutiny for recycling centres, I would do it after panel, just so we've gone through the panel process, and that the panel's asked to look at value for money, costs, what we found out over the last 12 months as well. So that was just my final point.
No, very helpful. Thank you, Simon, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We really appreciate it, and that's been a helpful contribution. Thank you. If there are no further comments, I would like to take members to agenda pack page 24, where we have the recommendations. 3.1. Excuse me, not looking at you because I've obviously got this on another screen to my left. So. The Scrutiny Work Programme 2021 as attached to Appendix 1A to be approved. The committee is asked to confirm how any future scrutiny activity should be undertaken and any comments on prioritisation. I think we've done some way gone towards that. Members have noted and agreed the officer update at para 2.7. There's a slight addendum to 3.4. I think we need to make a change to that, in that the scoping documents attached to Appendix 2 to the report be approved, subject to the scopes will be the scope on flooding will be updated as per our discussion this morning. And 3.5, any items to be added to the work programme at 2.10 are agreed. I'm looking to see if there's any comment about that, and if there's not, may I propose that we take those on block and you indicate your agreement or otherwise in the normal way. While we're waiting for that to come in, can I thank you? That was a wide-ranging series of comments. Thank you very much. It's certainly added to our thinking. And I'm sure that certainly the flooding one will benefit enormously. On the CAMS, I'm just minded. We did do a webinar, didn't we, on that? But officers will have a look and come back, and we'll talk about that offline, Nigel, because we all agree that is something that's very close to our hearts. That's all agreed. Thank you very much. Then I'd like to go over to Fiona to talk us through the work programme, if you would. Sorry, what am I doing? Sorry, I've got 3 screens up and none of them are saying the same thing. Right, good, excellent. We've reached that point. There is no part 1 business left. I just, at this stage, want to get deep, meaningful, and emotional. No, not really. It's been a challenge. I won't deny being chairman of Overviews of Scrutiny, but I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And for me, one of the most significant and valuable and enjoyable parts of it has been working with you. I think it's not a cabinet panel. It's not a committee in the formal sense, in the ordinary sense. We do really have quite a collegiate way of working. And when I go to scrutinies elsewhere, and I do because I make it my business where I can to go to other districts, boroughs, and counties and see how they do scrutiny, I'm not complacent, but I do come back. I have to say, driving home, I'm somewhat heartened that we're on the right track. We're never ever going to be perfect at it, but by goodness me, we will certainly push. So as there's no other business, and we don't now have, this committee will not now meet until the 1st of July, which is the other side of something significant on first week in May. May I take this opportunity to thank you all so much for being part of that process, the process that I am very proud of, and I hope you are too. And once again, to thank our excellent officers for their support. Can you take a bow, Fiona, Natalie, please? Take a bow.
Thank you. It's really appreciated by Fiona and I. We do. We're really passionate about scrutiny, and we want to make it work as effectively as we can for the residents. and the way that it works effectively for residents is by doing a good job for you, because you're their elected representatives. So we never lose sight of that. So I think the conversation today has been fantastic in terms of appreciating and looking back over what you've managed to do over 4 years. You've covered lots of different things. You've not been on soapboxes. And I think the committee is handing over a really solid work programme and a solid way of working that is a good model for us to pick up post-May. So I don't know if Fiona just wants to chip in, but I mean, thank you very much. Been great working with all of you.
Yeah, thank you. No, there's nothing else that I want to say other than thank you. And yeah, as Natalie says, we're both really passionate about scrutiny work, and so we just want to keep doing our best and keep listening to all of your suggestions and keep up the good work. But thank you, thanks everybody.
No, take a bow, because you truly are the support that you've given us is wonderful. Thank you so much. That's it. Members, any final comments? We're outside the meeting now. The meeting is closed. Any quick comments before we retire? No? Well,
thanks again to you and to the officers. Yep.
No, well, thank you. What happens in May will happen. We've all become closer as a result of this work. Let's see what happens in May, and we come out the other side and life will go on. We have laid, the word legacy has